Who is that one relative that no one in the family talks to and why? My uncle. He moved to Australia in the 1970s. He may or may not be alive. He may or may not be aware it's just him and my 96-year-old aunt left out of the original 7 siblings. No one has details for him. No big falling out. Just everyone seemed to vastly prefer him being in Australia. His only crimes I've managed to pin down are A, not letting my dad touch his Superman comics in 1960 whenever, and B, being a bit of an arsehole. Story 2. It was me, and it was because of my drinking. Coming up on 5 years sober, and it took 3 years of sobriety just to get invited to Christmas. So, next Christmas will only be like the second I've gotten the invite to in 15 years or so. Took my sister aside last weekend to give her an apology for all that time, and sorry that I was never an uncle to her kids. They're all grown now, so can't change that. But I am sorry the bottle was more important than everything. And everyone during that time, I lost everything. A lot of what and who I lost, I'll never be able to get back in my life. Story 3. Me, because I'm the only deaf member in the entire family, and the only deaf guy in the town as well. So there was almost no asshole beside mom, aunt, and older brother. Even so, we didn't really talk like a family. So I grew up with minimal sign language. No asshole for my B-Day, Christmas, Thanksgiving, etc. I now see holidays as pointless and waste of time. My mom only FaceTimed me once in 13 years. And that was to find out where my cousin were in the store I was with him at the time, but yet FaceTimed my cousin and older brother frequently. Go figures. If you've got a deaf family member, it helps a lot learning ASL and spending time with them. Don't leave them out. Story 4. My brother married a lunatic and was an asshole to my mom during her chemo. The Git's mom had the audacity to make a comment about how much my mom attended church at her memorial service and asked the preacher to reconsider doing the ceremony. Hopefully their God forgives them, because I never will. Story 5. I'm pretty sure my brother has killed someone, among other serious, maybe more serious crimes. Legally, there's nothing I can do. What evidence I know the police and FBI also know. I have a restraining order against him and moved as far away as I can. One day he'll finally go down for a crime, and there'll be a Netflix special on him. And they'll ask why the family was complicit, as if we could stop any of this. Story 6. My uncle. He has since passed, but he was a severe alcoholic and would come to family gatherings pissed out of his mind. Yes, he drove too. Died in a chair alone in his apartment. Death internally from alcohol. The EMS only got called due to the smell. I do miss him at times. He was a great uncle when I was young. Story 7. I have a really large family. We found out one brother was assaulting our sister. She had told my mom. Mom did nothing. That brother has been pushed out by the 12 of us. My parents are dead to us too. Story 8. I stopped speaking to my older sister because she is a holier-than-thou judgmental, miserable git. I have spoken to her once in 4 years, and that was when I answered the phone in my mom's ICU room. I told her if she wanted to say goodbye, she should get there. She did not. Mom died a few days later, and as far as I'm concerned, my older sister died that day too. I will never speak to her again. Story 9. My father-in-law. Boy, where do I start? Ite. Sorry, I obviously had to vent. This got way longer than I intended. My abusive, drunk, multi-time scammed, but won't believe it for a second, narcissistic, holiday-ruining father-in-law. He has been a narcissist his entire life. He was abusive and hard on my mill. And the 3 girls, I'm married to the youngest of the 3, they divorced back when my wife was 6, 1987. And my mill said it was the best thing she ever did, even though she didn't have a penny to her name and had to take care of 3 kids. He left and went to Montana and was a truck driver and never sent any money home. After many years, all 3 of the girls have somewhat repaired the relationship with him. But let me tell you, the work has all been by the 3 of them, and none by him. He is now just a drunk idiot who acts like a 15-year-old kid with no sense of responsibility. He has been scammed multiple times, has lost over $400,000, does not believe any of us when we tell him he is being scammed, keeps claiming he is just trying to get his stock out of the market. And once the Bitcoin comes through, he'll be set. My wife has bailed him out, not financially, from losing his house by going to court with him and getting the judge to extend the foreclosure twice now, while also working with Rocket Mortgage to set up autopay from a new account where his pension goes. So at least the mortgage is being paid automatically now. This man makes $6,000 plus a month from pension and military disability and only has a mortgage to pay, yet is constantly out of money. And he wants us to believe he isn't being scammed anymore, except he sold a motorcycle on FB Marketplace to a fake check scammer and actually let the local friend of the buyer come and pick up the bike with a trailer because the check cleared his bank and the money was his now. But sure enough, it bounced and that $5,000 was taken back out of his account and the freaking bike is gone. And on top of all that, he has promised so many things for his grandkids, our 2 and 5 more from my 2 sisters-in-law, and has just not delivered on anything. This last Christmas, we hosted everyone at our house. And after last year, we didn't want to invite him because he didn't bring any gifts for the kids, yet threw a damn fit that no one got him anything, including us. We don't exchange gifts between the adults, but especially the grandkids. He acted like a baby and left before dinner. So, fast forward to this Christmas, he is all, "Oh, don't you worry, I'll bring gifts for the kids, yada, yada, yada." So, all three families reluctantly each got a gift for him. All three of them marked as like they came from the kids of each family. Disclosure on purpose, we scheduled it so we already had the kids open their gifts and did that part without him before him arriving. He gets here, has absolutely nothing with him at all, and immediately asks where the beer is, grabs one, and after 2 big swigs, asks where his presents are. The last straw was him calling my wife again this last month, asking for her help in getting some Bitcoin transferred from a guy he knows, and my wife finding out in the call that he also is being taken to court again by Rocket Mortgage, and he also wants her to attend again. Nope, she shut him down and said, "Once you figure out your crap and get out of all this mess, we can talk. But until then, we are no contact," and hung up. He had the audacity to text her and ask if she would still go to the court hearing with him, and she unloaded on him in her response. Reminding him about something, he also promised my son that he hasn't accomplished in over a year, telling him that my Miles stepped in and took care of it for our son. His response was all about why she did that and trying to make him look bad, nothing about my son and how he broke his promise. We are done. Story 10. I used to try to help everyone when they needed it because I could afford to. 6 years ago, my wife had 2 strokes. I needed help taking care of her. I never got the first offer of any help. So on top of my 12-hour each day job, I take care of her by myself. I think often of how I gave up so much for everyone else and got treated this way. They all have get-togethers and vacations and things we never get invited to because she really is a handful. We just spend time with each other and our grown kids when we can and make the best of it. I do really get upset though because I am so tired and really could use a break, but it is what it is. Thank you for listening. Story 11. Me. Because I escaped to the opposite coast 50 years ago, and the *1* that isn't dead is on my permanent no-talk crap list. I'm so happy to have left this family behind. The only one I cared about was my mom, and I know she envied, not in a bad way, the fact that I chose freedom over conformity. I wish she had too, but she was trapped. If this resonates with anyone, remember that you don't have to love emotional abusers. Run away. Story 12. Me, I am dealing with depression, and I struggle to believe I belong anywhere. Feel like a burden to everyone, so I don't want to bring them down. Also have never lived up to what everyone thought I should be. I am also a lot younger than my siblings, and they hated my dad. We had different fathers, so lots of trauma, and probably me since I'm so risk-averse. Story 13. My uncle. He stole tens of thousands of dollars from my grandmother while she was dying of cancer, defaulted on business agreements with my father, and then disappeared. There's a lot more to this, but for the sake of brevity and not being *2, *specific, we'll leave it at that. Story 14. Get comfy. This one is a slow burn. Full disclosure. I'm a stupid asshole, and I probably didn't handle any of this very well, but I feel vindicated by how everything turned out. I have a cousin I'll call Max who was always a little immature. He'd post edgy stuff on Facebook and got a little too into nerd culture. Whenever we saw him, he'd be attached to his mom. He's a few years older than me, and despite the fact that we technically had a lot of common interests, he gave me the ick. He didn't try to talk to me, so I left him alone. Fast forward to his early 20s, and we see Max for the first time in a while at a family thing. He gets drunk and spends all night hitting on his female cousins and in-laws. Mind, they weren't blood related to him, but I still find that kind of thing distasteful, so I continued to ignore him. Fast forward a bit further, and Max has got a successful YouTube career. I think he started it as a teenager, but it really took off in his mid-20s. When I learn about this, I throw it on, and it's some of the cringiest crap I've ever seen, so I keep ignoring him. I was at a bar, chatting with a friend one day, and YouTube comes up. I mentioned that I have a cousin with a show, but I haven't seen it. Fav recognizes Max's online stage name and says that Max has a whole fandom. Fav goes on to say his show is very good and that I should give it another chance. I pick a random episode, and in it, the Mac is lamenting how he feels like his family has ousted him, and he feels alone and rejected. It was a passionate performance, and I actually cried right there in the middle of the bar. The next day, I round up another male cousin, just in case Max was still weird around women, and organize dinner and drinks with the 3 of us. My plan is to reconnect, maybe apologize for being an icy crap, and welcome the black sheep back into the flock, or at least be polite to him if we still don't mesh. I don't really get the chance because Max is absurdly rude to the waitstaff, to the point where we pulled the server aside and apologized when Max was in the bathroom. Also, he was extremely evasive about his YouTube career when we asked him about it. This had been something he'd done for the entirety of his adult life, and he had nothing to say about it, which was odd. All he'd say is that he was taking a break. I go home and relate the story to my sew. She's never met him and decides to Google him. Something I honestly never thought to do, but maybe should have. She informs me that Max has gotten in trouble for grooming ladies. Not once, but twice. In both cases, he met his victims through the fandom for his show. Apparently, his taking a break was more like laying low. Now that I'm older, wiser, and have the confidence to say, I'm not coming to the BBQ if you invite that idiot. I don't have to deal with Max anymore. I've continued my lifelong tradition of ignoring him, and that's what I intend to keep doing. Story 15. Me. My sister went public with the abuse that was done to us as kids and the family members who did it in 2022. At age 13 and again at 15, she did try and get police involved, but the mother of the cousin that was harming us was friends with many people in the department and is married to one now. So my sister's story was never believed. We suffered very awful abuse for roughly 6 years. My mother was informed, an aunt, our grandmother, and police. Yet our mom still took us to that aunt's house so she could enjoy her time with her husband without her 2 daughters around. We never received justice. Today, our family has shunned not only her, but I as well. They still have all of the abusers in their close circle, and to this day, no one from the family believes us, despite injuries being shown over the years. My sister is now 5 months clean from her addiction as a result of our upbringing. I turned out all right, I guess currently in therapy and working through everything. But yeah, damn, it's my family. Story 16. The aunt on my mom's side. She went absolutely nuts when my grandmother came down with stage 4 terminal illness. We had just moved away from my grandmother. She was basically living with us from the day I was born till the time I was 13 years old. My grandmother came down with illness. She started taking cannabis oil to cure it. It was working. 95% of the disease cells over her body had vanished in 2 months. She was going to be seen by National Geographic because nobody had seen this before. My mom's sister, my aunt, just went nuts. She called us druggies for the medicinal use of cannabis oil to cure her mother's illness. It wasn't recreationally, federally legal in my state yet. Despite it all, though, even if I was against it, if it was working, why would I be upset? My mother's still alive, right? She moved herself into my grandmother's apartment, got a restraining order on my mother. This was before you needed a physical threat to get one. Not me or my sibling were allowed to see my grandmother. My aunt pushed chemotherapy on my grandmother. My grandmother, having no other way to get treatment, she had to say yes to chemo. My aunt refused to leave her house to let any of us see her. Everything went downhill. The chemo killed the healthy parts of her body. I hadn't seen her from May 28th, the weekend before Thanksgiving 2014. When I had seen her, she was just skin and bones, looked nothing like my grandmother. She passed December 1st, 2014. My aunt didn't call anyone. She robbed my grandmother's entire house of items, gifts we gave her that we obviously wanted back to keep for ourselves. I forgot who actually was notified, but my grandmother died 2:44 p.m. and nobody was notified until 7 p.m. Haven't seen my aunt since. She dropped off the listed belongings that my mother requested back, but haven't seen her since. I'll never forgive her, and if I ever got the chance, I'm going to spit in her face. My grandmother would have been 80 this year. She was only 69 when she died. Story 17. For me, it's my Aunt 63F. I have no parents, and my final grandparent passed away a few months ago. Out of their 4 children, only my mother chose to have a single kid, so now it's me, 31M, surrounded by 2 childless aunts in middle age who live with 20 miles of me. When Mom was alive, she was the venting board for her younger siblings and kind of became the head of the family after their matriarch, my grandma, passed away in 2016. When Grandma passed, Mom became the head of the family, so to speak, and everyone dumped their problems / conflicts / and sorrows on her, which was highly damaging, and I could tell she was worn out. Now that Mom is also gone, even though I am the youngest one left, I'm constantly on the other end of my aunt's demands for help with yard work. We all can afford to hire people now, but they still demand I come over and do it free. Personal issues and attention since they decided to not have children. One of these aunts lives further away and is very demanding of my time. Generally, guilt tripping me about how family is supposed to drop everything and come and help, no questions asked. It has gotten to the point when I can't tell her if I am planning a vacation because she will fake a mental health crisis right when I am going, and I will have to drop everything to come walk on eggshells with her. I am far better off financially now than I used to be and can afford to take trips more often, and I think it makes her jealous, so she will call sobbing in the middle of a depression crisis when she knows I am about to depart in an effort to get me to either invite her or cancel my journey altogether. I just had to go NC with her this week because of her behavior. I have no need for the same stresses that eventually killed my mom. I am not a therapist. She's apparently ranting at my other aunt currently about how rude and nasty I am for not making her problems my burden. Story 18. My dad. He's a loose cannon jackass who intentionally avoids smiling, affection, emotional connection, and humility. Before everyone else cut him off, I was the first. He constantly berated the people close to him, including me, with vile, toxic text messages. He would spread false rumors about me to family members, telling them I was basically a delinquent deadbeat. He had a habit of sending people he was angry with, including me, loosely interpretable death threats. A few times in my youth, they were literal, but he only did it to other family members. I partly put up with it for as long as I did because I grew up seeing him overreact to things that way, and as unhealthy as I could recognize it as a child, I held on to the delusion that eventually I would just have a normal father-son relationship with him like other kids whose dads were in their lives. We had a rocky relationship, but I'd already cut him off before. Around the time my grandma, his mom, passed, it had been at least 2 years since I'd spoken to him, but she made me promise that I would try to fix things with him because he changed. After she died, I genuinely tried to honor my grandmother by becoming more accessible to my dad and speaking with him and introducing him to my daughter. And then he casually showed me he was stockpiling guns and ammo. I don't think I ever dropped someone out of my frame of reference without even thinking about it so quickly. It wasn't that hard because I already hadn't spoken to him for 2 years prior. After that, I notified my family that what he was doing and never looked back. Sure enough, in their own respective ways, several other family members started cutting him out of their lives for their own similar related reasons. I have no idea where my dad is, and from that point on, it's been a conscious decision to keep it that way. I really wish I had a healthy father growing up, but the next best thing is being the person to my daughter that I wish I had. Story 19. When I was little, I had an older cousin. He was in high school when this happened, so I was maybe entering middle school. As soon as he was able to, 16/18, he sued his parents for neglect and a whole bunch of wrong things. He pretty much had an awful childhood. Got into substances and bad crowds because his parents just straight up neglected him in every way. When they went to court, it was a wake-up call for the dad. He sobbed and pleaded guilty without question. He had so much remorse and just wanted his son to forgive him, which he eventually did, and they became close again later. He is a good man. He just made some awful mistakes, and he spent the rest of his son's life trying to make up for it all. The mom, however, lied in the entire court process to cover her has. She spent some time in jail, where the dad then divorced her. Many years later, my cousin died from an overdose. He was doing well, but relapsed. We had a whole funeral and celebration of life, and the whole family came together, except for the mom. The mom refused to show and demanded that she be able to have her own funeral with the son. IDK if that ever happened. We also don't talk to my grandmother. I use quotes because we aren't related. When my dad was a young adult, late teens, early 20s, his dad left the family to find himself, leaving Mad Dad's grandmother and mom to take care of 3 kids. Now that doesn't sound like the worst thing, especially if he came back eventually, which he did. However, finding himself meant finding a new wife that was my dad's age. Yeah, I have a grandmother that's the same age as my dad. He never apologized or ever thought it was wrong. The grandmother tries to act like she's really our grandmother or my dad's mom, and we try to ignore her best we can, even at social gatherings. Story 20. Distant cousin. I heard many stories about what a troublemaker he was growing up, skipping school, joining gangs, being arrested, detained several times, having a wedding, and the wife leaving almost immediately and dumping their baby on him. I feel really bad for the child. Having a very questionable, high-paying job and being an overall git. I saw him a few times when visiting family and at weddings, and he always looked like he was hiding something and had no manners whatsoever. I asked my direct cousins about him, and they would just shake their heads and not want to say much. The whole family seemed really messed up. The father is a twin, and the other brother's family, who lives close by, has a much more stable and well-mannered family. But this distant cousin family was a mess. I often hear the mother is really dumb and does a lot of questionable things too, and is always lying about how great everything else, and is in denial constantly when talking to my parents. Then my parents talks to other relatives, and they get a completely different story. I feel like the mother plays a huge part in such an unstable family. This cousin also has a younger sister who almost never speaks and looks away from everyone like she's got some social mental disorder that was neglected and ignored. I heard when she became an adult, she just left and cut off contact. Honestly, I'm not surprised. And time to time, I hear the mother saying positive lies about her family and other relatives, denouncing all her bees. It sickens me that I'm somehow related to that cousin and his idiot mother. Story 21. My uncle, Terry, name change. He is in his 60s, outwardly sexist, and always talks about his glory days when he was in high school. All the substances he did, the women he scored with, the cars and motorcycles he drove, and how he drove them. How great he was, etc. But hasn't done anything with his life in the last 40+ years. He's not a drunk or anything, just doesn't have a redeeming, likable quality, and is just typically miserable. He hits on any woman he sees at family functions, if given the opportunity to be alone with them for more than 5 minutes. When I was younger, I warned any of my girlfriends to steer clear of him, and specifically pointed him out. I make sure to never leave my wife while at family functions if he's around. Decades ago, when my sister was a minor, he had the opportunity to corner her and make a pass, and occasionally would make some risque comments. To this day, my sister refuses to be in the same room as he. He's never inappropriately touched someone or physically assaulted anyone that I know of. He's just an overall sleazeball. He's ultimately harmless. but just makes everyone uncomfortable. He complains about everything and everyone. Nothing is ever good enough. I genuinely have never seen him happy, or smile for that matter. He and his wife, Sarah, name change, have been married for what seems like forever. At least once or twice, they almost got divorced, separated for a while. And the running joke in the family was that if they got divorced, Sarah would stay in the family and Terry would go away. Grandma always tried to keep the peace and get the family together, but after she passed, we don't do many family gatherings together. If we do, he rarely shows, thankfully. I've probably seen him twice in the last 15 years. I have young kids, boys and girls, and hope they never meet him. Story 22, me. When my grandfather passed, he split his belongings up between 12 kids. None of the grandkids got anything. And his wife, my grandmother, only got one thing, a cabin he'd built for her in the Rocky Mountains back in the 40s. Where I'll go to die someday, as she used to call it. It was everything in the world to her, until the eldest son challenged the will because he believed he was entitled to more than was left. I spent 4 years and dozens of thousands of dollars fighting in court to make sure she kept what was rightfully hers. Of the 512 acres that the cabin sat on, I managed to get 11.5. The rest was sold off, and the money split between a few of the other kids. They went to war over 500 acres when the will was parceling out over 62K acres between mountain and farmlands. When my grandmother started to go after the first heart attack, it was the first time that I'd heard from my uncle, her eldest son, since we finished in court. I told him it was it, and he needed to get down soon to say his goodbyes. He brushed me off and told me he'd put together 100K to put the cabin back where it belongs. I needed to be restrained by hospital personnel, and he threatened to press charges if I didn't sell him the property. I outlived him, and the property is mine now. I'm slowly buying back the land we lost from a couple of different parties. None of it belongs to any of my uncles or aunts who fought for it in the first place, and I told all of them that if they ever darkened my doorstep, I'd kill them. Their kids have held the grudge and view me the bad guy for stealing their heritage. Story 23. Me. My dad enlisted in the military while my mom was pregnant, so I didn't grow up around my uncles, aunts, cousins, grandparents. So they pretty much forget that I even exist. A couple months ago, there was a death in the family and we went to the funeral. After the funeral, we were at someone's house. Another person called every woman in the living room a cattle of gits. Well, my mom was in the room, and while my sister didn't give a crap, I was pissed that this who didn't even know my mom called her a git. Like I said, I am not around my extended family. I don't know them. Don't know how they are like, what it is even like to be close to extended family. My family are close friends that I've had since high school, and their family since they treat me like I'm a part of their household. So I told the asshole to apologize to my mother for calling her a git. This resulted in my cousins and their kids ready to kick my ass. I'm 46 years old. Some of these guys were older than me and had kids in their 20s ready to give me a beating. Getting shunned from a post-funeral event for defending my mom from an undeserving insult, and spending the rest of the event with my mom on the porch as everyone else. Including my sister had a good time. My mom was thankful that I did what I did. My sister, who is 44, is talking about moving closer to them so she can be a real member of the family. She took the time to point out that there is no need to uproot my life and move closer to them. They were happier not knowing of my existence. Story 24. My maternal step-uncles, well, mostly one of them. The others are fine. When my grandfather died, my step-grandmother was depressed, as one would be when their spouse of approximately 25 years dies. We spent as much time with her as we could, seeing her or talking to her once a month. One day, she tells us she is moving because her kids told her that was best for her. Her kids gave away her dog, sold the house my grandfather bought for the two of them, and told her she was going into an assisted living facility if she wanted to see her biological grandkids. She died in 2010. Her kids didn't even call us when she was dying. She had apparently been sick for weeks. On her deathbed, the greediest of her kids had her change her will from everything being split equally between her kids, 3, and non-disinherited stepkids, 5, which is what she and my grandfather agreed to, and had in his will, and changed it completely to her kids getting everything. He did it because he wanted to retire a few years earlier. He got to retire at 45 instead of 50. When he discovered my mom and an aunt were listed as beneficiaries on one of my step-grandmother's retirement accounts, he didn't know that account existed. He came over to our house and told my mom to give him the money, because it's what she would have wanted. My grandfather wisely invested and worked for a well-known company that gave stock to employees and was worth low 7 figures at the time of his death. My mom and aunt got 40K each. Duck you, Jeff. You had money, the rest of us didn't. I hope your business starts to fail and you pour all of your ill-gotten gains into it and die destitute. Story 25. My dad, his brother, and their mother. My dad and uncle are abusive alcoholics, and we have pretty much just washed our hands of them. Getting a call every few months to say goodbye to your dad and him refusing to get help gets draining. And my uncle left rehab and threatened to kill relatives, so they have a restraining order, and no one wants anything to with him. Their mother took off and disappeared when I was a toddler, and no one knows where she is, or even what her real name is. She had done this numerous times throughout their childhood as well. Our poppy, Her husband was pretty tight-lipped about family history and was about to talk to my cousin about everything. But he passed away before he could, so now it's just a big mystery we may never solve. One of my cousins did spot my dad the other day at her work, and he apparently looks in bad shape, but he has for years, has been on death's door multiple times, and has severe liver cirrhosis. It's honestly some kind of twisted miracle he's still alive. There's also my mom's older sister. She was in Egypt in 2020 and refused to come back when she had the chance and got stuck there for over a year, basically abandoning her minor daughter who had to move in with her dad. He forced her to get a job and pay for everything she needed, the wank turd. We offered to take her in, but she wanted to stay with her friends. She met a guy over there, gave him all of her money, came back, sold everything, and then went back and married him. Have no idea if she's still in Egypt or Australia, and her daughter has nothing to do with her. Story 26. Pretty sure it's me. Once my adoptive mother passed, I've pretty much never heard from my family again. And even while she was in hospice, they began to refuse to refer to her as my mother. Some people really can't handle an adopted biracial family member, or that he's treated or provided for equally to the natural-born in estate and inheritance. Even one cousin I'd considered one of the best in the family my entire life and always tried to steer good fortune towards began to say things, "We all know who's asterisk, really asterisk your mother," and then accidentally sent me an email, meant for his sister, where he laughed about stealing money left for me that I'd been actively trying to get the attention of family and the authorities over as it was, swindled and embezzled from my mom on her deathbed by family that acted as fiduciaries for her. They literally stole and sold off her entire house for a fraction of its worth, just so it couldn't be left to me as her estate dictated just total complicity in gross, ongoing elder abuse from someone I trusted who once described my mom as one of the only people in the family who had ever shown him genuine, unconditional love. When I was a toddler, we traveled to the East Coast to visit family. And there was one family member who wouldn't let my mom and I in the house because I was with her. We slept on his front porch with all our suitcases and things and left in the morning. Growing up, my sister's go-to ridicule was to refer to me or something I'd done as off-color. Story 27. When my great-uncle died, he gave all of his family photos to my mother. My mother's cousin asked my mother for any photos my mother had of her family. My mother made copies of those photos and gave her those as she kept the originals, as my great-uncle wanted her to keep the originals. About 6 months later, our semi-annual family reunion, and during it, my mom's cousin was just saying mean crap about my mother to anyone that would listen. Word got to my mother, who asked what her problem was, and they argued over the original pictures, even though my great-uncle put in his will that my mother was to keep them. My mom's cousin slapped my mother, and my mother laid her out with a right straight that shocked everybody. My mom's cousin's husband then grabbed my mother in a chokehold and pushed her to the ground, so my dad, my cousin, and I beat the crap out of my mom's cousin's husband. My mom's cousin called the cops and an ambulance for her husband. The reunion was over, and everyone was mad at the cousin for starting that at the family reunion. Then she tried to sue, basically, my whole immediate family for assaulting her husband, which was thrown out when the rest of the family and the cop she called day of explained what happened. Now, nobody talks to my mom's cousin who moved to the other side of the country, and her husband died in a motorcycle accident because he was drunk. Story 28. That's me, because I was abused by my sister's husband, 18 years older than me. And after 40 years of playing it down to myself and keeping silent and becoming an alcoholic and several years of therapy, I finally broke my silence. Shame of the family, where everything that's not perfect has to be swept under the rug. Story 29. My aunt. When one of my uncles passed away, my other aunts and uncles, besides this one aunt, decided to give their piece of the inheritance to the one uncle who basically sacrificed his whole life to take care of the uncle that passed. The uncle that passed got into a horrible motorcycle accident at the age of 20. He was paralyzed from the neck down and could not eat on his own, nor go to the bathroom, and he could barely speak. And on top of this, he would wake up every day not remembering anything past the day he got into the accident. My other uncle had to explain to him and comfort him every day with the reality of what happened to him. From 20 until he passed in his late 40s, my other uncle cared for him. This one, aunt, did not want to give her part of the inheritance and took legal action and was horrible to the whole family because she wanted what she wanted. It is a shame. Edited for grammatical errors. Story 30. My mom's dad. I refuse to call him my grandpa. I don't know what exactly he did, but the entire family cut him out when my mom was 4. He later remarried and divorced. The woman he married to on the second does still keep contact with us, though, and is a great person, and then remarried for the 3rd time and divorced again. In the first marriage, he had my mom, oldest, and her younger brother and sister. In the second one, he had one single boy, and in the third, he had twins, boy and girl. Also, the woman he married to after he divorced my grandma remarried herself and had 2 daughters. Her husband, which was very important to me, passed away a few years ago. We keep contact with all his kids and their mothers. We just cut him. Story 31. Me. My mother is perpetually miserable. has narcissistic tendencies, and is an emotional vampire. Me putting up healthy boundaries amounted to betrayal in her eyes. As a result, she told me not to come to her funeral when she dies. Say less. Have a nice life. Puss. Story 32. My mom, because she's a crippling addict and has a long history of crap, including abuse, neglect, letting others abuse us, stealing money from everyone, oddly having an obsession with driving children around while drunk and/or high, planted substances on my uncle, then proceeded to tell everyone how evil he is for kicking her out. Did that one to all of us, except I personally have never had to kick her out, and it's not always planting meth. There's a lot of crap she's done, but I can't even remember it all at the moment. One thing is that she's gotten away with everything, despite having witnesses, evidence to the abuse, literally being charged with a ton of crap. And yet the most punishment she's gotten was a couple days in jail even now with my youngest brother. She had last year. She even got her custody taken away. Yet she's still living there with his dad, despite not being allowed to. DCFS CPS literally knows and doesn't care. Story 33, me. They kept stealing from me, using me for free food, transportation, labor, treating me like crap, and being patronizing as duck. I cut them all out. My found family loves me very much and treats me with respect. They've never stolen from me or try to use me to get stuff or do stuff for them. My daughter is growing up with loving, supportive people who nurture and protect her, instead of a bunch of grifters who would exploit her as a resource for money and labor, while gaslighting her into believing she's incompetent and stupid. Story 34. I'd say me. Like was above, I am deaf. I was dragged to family events where I was left alone because I couldn't understand people nor cared to participate if they weren't going to meet me halfway. I can hear due to having a device that helps me, and I can speak. But it is hard following multiple conversations, especially when voices overlap with each other. I can sign, and I was fortunate to have a deaf aunt from my mom's side, but she lived in a different state, so she wasn't there most of the time. I enrolled in a deaf school in my state in my first year of high school and never looked back. Stopped attending family events and moved states away once I hit the college years. I am also from a village of 750 people in middle of nowhere, literally in the rural Midwest, so I'm not missing out on anything. I only speak to a very few family members, but lost contact with majority of extended family. I don't think I've seen or spoken to 95% of my family since I was 14 years old, and I am now 35. Story 35. My cousin. It's a huge family, and he's the only one no one wants anything to do with. He's a lovable guy when you're on his good side, and everyone has given him like 30 extra chances because of it. But he's a bipolar alcoholic who doesn't take medication and refuses to get sober or take responsibility for his behavior. Everyone in the family has a story of him having a rage episode where he either verbally or physically assaults them, me included. He threw my dog in the pool after it ate his sandwich. He hit his brother with an empty bottle of Jack over nothing. Broke a guy's jaw for texting when he was telling him a story, and so much more. It's sad because he's also the heart of the family. The sweetest, most generous guy ever. He'd drop anything to help you if you were in trouble, and he's always checking in on you to make sure you're doing well in life. Just no emotional regulation at all. His life swings between two massive extremes. Story 36. My cousin was involved in organized crime and put his family through hell. We still kept him around for some reason. He was the charming, handsome, funny cousin. Everybody loved him. Our grandma confronted him over him doing substances in the bathroom at our little cousin's birthday. He snapped at her and viciously attacked her. He then ran out of the house. My uncle and dad and cousin found him a few days later and beat him, and then nobody ever spoke to him again. Story 37. Kinda fits, but kinda doesn't. Half of the family talks to him. Cousin who was arrested on 30 counts of possession of CP and 30 counts of risk of injury to a minor, I believe. They used that as probable cause to raid his house and seize his electronic devices and search them. They found the SAM. They didn't charge him with the messages to the girl, so she didn't have to testify in court, which can be traumatic by itself, and just opted to charge him on the other stuff. Surprise, surprise, he's a MAGA nut job. And the half of the family that are also MAGA asshats pretty much act like it never happened. He got state-level charges in PA, and I don't think he even served 2 years. Story 38. No one is really talking to me. I recently was diagnosed with autism. I guess I'm weird. I reached out a lot after I left my abusive ex, but it's like everyone didn't care about me after I did. It's not necessarily me, though, because I have community around me I'm involved in. Story 39. It's me because I exposed what my brother did to me as a kid, and the whole family took his side except for one auntie. They can all rot, and they whine and complain they can't see my kids much. Sorry, but I won't allow my kids to be around a that gets. I will go to jail for murder if that brother ever is around my kids again. Story 40. Me. All because I exposed the molesters, and in the family. I was immediately outcast as though I never existed by both sides of my family. But I fought for 2 children and won custody of them. The cycle of abuse will end with me. Story 41. My dad is that sibling now for his brothers. Oddly enough, my dad is the one who graduated high school, graduated college, worked hard his whole life, saved money, and now lives a comfortable life. His 3 brothers have 2 high school diplomas between the 3 of them, and one has been to rehab for addiction a few times. One is an alcoholic, and one has never had to pay for anything on his own. When my grandfather died, my dad had to help the one who never paid for anything set up the bills for his house that my grandfather gave him in his name. The other 2 live off government disability. They call my dad, but only to ask for money. He and my mom no longer take their calls. Story 42. My wife's stepfamily has several bad genetics, addictive personalities. It doesn't help that my wife's father thinks he can fix them and spends hundreds of thousands sending them away to places for therapy and to get them clean of addictions. After 30 years of wasting money on one of the stepsons, his wife, the mom, finally convinced him to stop. She spent 25 years telling him to stop wasting his time and money, but he couldn't help himself. My wife's father doesn't give a crap about you if you are hard-working, productive members of society. It's only if you have problems that he'll want to be your best friend. My wife's stepsister says her knee hurts, so wife's father has her quit her job and he now supports her. She goes on vacations constantly and parties all the time. She's 47. He sees nothing wrong with this. Story 43. We don't do this in our family, even the extended one. Our grandma was the black sheep. No one would talk to her. One time she called a family reunion for a week. When we got there, we all had a role to be a black sheep for just a few hours. No one would speak to you. It's very depressing. Our parents told us that's what she faced for more than 20 years. No family spoke to her. There's no one day that passes that I don't check on someone or someone checks on me. When someone is in crap, we all know, and we support them. The legacy passes on. We're tight AF. If you mess with one of us, I swear my papa-uncle will pull you over and have words. Story 44. Me. I got sick with Crohn's, non-diabetic LRP, and can't walk. It's crazy how fast your friends and family abandon you when you can't go out like you used to. Being called a hermit only salts the wound. Went from a national qualified runner and athlete to being sick is apparently a choice. Some of my family say that if I were closer to God, I wouldn't be so sick, if only it was that easy. It wasn't even like it happened over a long period either. Prior to 2020, I was walking, working, eating, and socializing. I'm lucky I have a saint for a wife, so I manage. It just surprised me how fast everyone dropped me. Some people have no idea how to deal with illness when it affects their loved ones and friends. Story 45. My brother. He's homeless, addict, beat his family in and out of jail. My sister. She's just a massive git. One year, my brother's kids were in foster care and only had one day out with our family to go to lunch. It was around Christmas. They wanted to get pizza, but my sister was complaining that they don't have good salads. Keep in mind, she was 34 years old at the time. These kids were maybe 6, 8, and 12, so they end up going to some salad bar restaurant because my sister threw a hissy fit as an adult. I wish I'd been there to stop my mom from caving in, but that sister and I were also getting death threats regularly from our brother, and mom didn't even seem to care. He also molested her when they were in high school. Mom didn't do anything there. Story 46. Right now, my dad, sadly, was a good guy until he lost his job and fell to alcohol and substances, became verbally, emotionally abusive, and would constantly lie so he could get some money for booze and blow. Treated everyone like they were the dirt beneath him until he lost everything. Now he begs everyone for money and to give him a chance just to go drink and yell at people again. Story 47. Me. I hear from my family every few months in the group chat we are all in, but they speak to each other on a weekly basis. They admit I've done nothing wrong, but that I don't need them. I am the middle child. Classic, ignored, left to my own devices, head in a book as a kid. When I grew up, my siblings were in messy relationships and needed bailing out financially and physically on several occasions. I felt guilty at asking my parents for help when things weren't going well for me, so I just kept quiet and dealt with things myself. The fallout from this is that they think I'm not interested. In reality, I'm hurt and feel like they just don't care, so I stopped trying. Story 48. Me. I objected to being bullied by my sister. They all said I was too sensitive and that she had the right to bully me because she's the older one. I stopped speaking to them all once I was told that I don't deserve to be treated with respect. Story 49. It's funny reading all the "it's me, I'm the black sheep" replies because I know that would be my brother's response to this. But he wasn't the black sheep, he just claims to be because we all cut him out of our lives for being extremely abusive and toxic. Story 50. It's me. The reason is that there was serious abuse going on in the family before I was born. Everyone just went hush-hush and never talked about it. Well, I did and cut off all contact after making a big scene. From what I heard, I am a sore topic, and the main abuser even wanted to make sure that I was excluded in some weird message that gets put in the local paper after someone dies. I haven't talked to the guy in about 7 years at that point. Makes me feel good to know that I lived rent-free in his head for years. He dead now. No justice has been served. Died surrounded by the people he abused. Story 51. Me. When I was 8, a distant cousin 6, after meeting me for the first time, told everyone I sacrificed to Satan. The whole extended family stopped talking to me and inviting me to events. Even my mom knew and believed the rumor, but never told me. For perspective, we were Jewish atheists, so we didn't believe in Satan. Also, I had a healthy puppy at home. What I don't understand is if you thought your kid was killing puppies, you should at the bare minimum take away their puppy and get them some therapy. She did none of that. I found out 20 years later when the cousin was getting investigated for multiple murders she might have committed. Story 52. I have low contact with my older brother. He's almost 40 and doesn't even have a job. When he talks to you, you know he will ask for money or a favor, or he proposes something in which the only person who benefits is himself. He owes money to me, to my grandmother, to my brother. He has borrowed things from me and then put them up for sale. Story 53. Me. I graduated and couldn't find work in my home state, so I moved a couple of states away for a job. As soon as I wasn't 20 minutes away, it's like I stopped existing. I stopped calling once I realized no one called me, like all of my grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, all of them. The only person who made any attempts to include me in family gatherings was my aunt, who isn't a blood relative. She married my uncle. When they divorced, I kept in touch with her, but not my uncle. There is no reason that I know of. It's just not convenient for them, I guess. Story 54. My aunt and uncle. After my mom died, they took my grandma, got power of attorney over her life, and wiped out her accounts within minutes of moving out of my dad's house. Bought all their family members' iPads for Christmas and let my grandma die in the garage in the middle of winter. I don't care that they stole my inheritance. It wasn't much, but I really miss my grandma to this day. Story 55. One of my dad's cousins didn't do anything bad that I know of, but he would just disappear in the Florida Keys for years. Nobody would know how to get in touch with him, or even if he was alive or not. Out of the blue, he would randomly show up at someone's door, stay for a few days, then disappear again. Never asked for anything, and never needed any money. He just lived his life on his own terms. His biggest claim to fame was that he worked on every bridge replacement on Us One in the Keys. I'd also heard that he was on a first-name basis with Jimmy Buffett. Story 56. Not my family, but my wife's family on her mother's side. Everyone has shunned her uncle after they discovered how he mistreated his mother. He completely drained all of her bank accounts, and when she was too far gone with dementia, he just packed up and left, leaving her by herself for a week before her daughter found her in a really terrible state. She passed a few months later, unable to leave anything behind. No jewels, no money, no property, nothing. Her son took everything and left nothing to his siblings. So him, his 2 kids, and girlfriend have no family on his side anymore. Story 57. My Uncle Greg. His Alzheimer's dementia is so bad he doesn't recognize anyone in his family anymore, and visiting just scares and confuses him because it's out of his routine. It's really sad because we do miss him. It's sad to know the next time we see him won't be until his funeral. Story 58. My mom. She's toxic, manipulative, narcissistic, and verbally abusive. We're rarely invited to family events. We didn't have any kind of relationship with any cousins or aunts, uncles when we were younger. Everybody is really close, going on family holidays, meeting for meals, etc. But we're not. Or we're invited only as an afterthought, like the day before when it's far too late to arrange to attend. Nobody likes her and she brings it on herself entirely. Story 59. One of my cousins distanced himself from the family. I support his decision and trust his reasoning. Hope he's okay, but I think his dad and my grandpa just didn't treat well. My grandma is very upset, but I'm going to add this in my motivation to never marry a controlling man. She is paying for it so much in her late life, and she honestly doesn't deserve it. She was alienated from multiple family members because of him. Story 60. My mom's brother, he cheated on his wife. We still talk to her. They divorced. He kidnapped their 2 kids and took them to Singapore for years, then took them on a houseboat off the coast of Mexico for a while, and meanwhile was scrutinizing my aunt for being a bad mom. She's a wonderful, cheerful, cute Swiss woman. Because we still talk to her. He refuses to talk to anyone. We don't really care. She has full custody of the kids now in Switzerland. Story 61. Kind of backwards of what you're expecting. But one of my cousins just disappeared one day. She was in her late 20s, moved out of state, and stopped answering the phone for anyone. So nobody talks to her anymore, just not by choice. Oh, and I've got another cousin who seems to have misplaced a teenager. He and his wife had adopted her from China. One day, he had 12 kids. The next day, he had 11, and who the hell knows where that one went. Story 62. My father. He is a narcissistic with main character syndrome. I am full nos with him as he would yell at me for not living my life just as he says. He is now married to wife #4 and constantly posts things on AFB about how horrible my mom is, and they were divorced over 40 years ago. Wife #4 does not see this as she is not allowed on FB, nor is she allowed to have her own email and must use their shared email account. Story 63. It was me BCs of drinking and walking away from religion. Even in my sobriety, my mom could hold a grudge till death and forbade my dad and sisters from talking to me. Communication was sparse. She died 2 years ago, knowing she had a month left and never called. I found out a few months later when my sister called. They both tried talking like they wanted to have a relationship, but it's too late. I guess I'm like my mom and hold grudges too. Story 64. My mom is the person in her family, but it's not because she's a bad person or she has issues with substance abuse. The majority of her family just doesn't like who she loves. Her family is very white, and my dad, brother, and I are black. I have a Latino uncle, but they're fine with him. Some of my family don't care, namely a couple cousins, but I haven't spoken with any of my aunts or uncles in almost 16 years. Story 65? Uncle Joe. The master of unsolicited advice. He's like a walking, talking life hack video, but all his hacks somehow involve using duct tape or conspiracy theories. Family gatherings aren't complete without him cornering someone to explain why we should all wear tinfoil hats to avoid government mind reading. Story 66. Me, and it's because I'm transgender. The only members of my large biological family who will acknowledge that I exist are my half-great uncle and his wife, my mom, and my gay cousin. They literally pretend like I don't exist. They can go to hell, though. I'm better off without them. Story 67. My older sister. She's a compulsive liar who has spent many years in and out of prison. She lies about being pregnant and having children to try to guilt-trip people into giving her money. She's been pretty much exiled from the family. Her latest scam was that she had a baby, but it took me no time to find the actual child on one of her friends' Facebooks that she was stealing the photos from. Story 68. My aunt. At least in my immediate family. Over 20 years ago, she invited my dad to try his luck in the US. One day, out of the blue, she kicked him out because her niece was coming for a visit, and I guess she thought her brother could go away. He was left to his own devices in a foreign country, barely speaking any English. He still hasn't forgiven her, and probably never will. Story 69. Sadly, it's rapidly becoming the Trump-supporting Bill and his family. We don't really care about their politics, but they insist on pushing them on everyone, inserting them into conversations, etc. They've ruined family holidays over it. BC, they explode if anyone ever tries to point out that facts don't align with their opinions, and that words like socialist don't mean what they keep insisting they mean. Story 70. Me. I was raised a Jehovah's Witness, and most of my family are witnesses. So when I decided I no longer wanted anything to do with the cult, I was basically cut off. Mother does small talk, even though I'd prefer complete silence from her. Brother is an asshat pause, so I don't bother with him. Dad is the only one I have no problem with. He has no problem with talking to. Story 71. Decided this summer that would be my cousin. He did some very unsavory things with me when I was younger. Only some close friends know. Don't know if I'll ever tell the family. Getting some therapy in a few weeks because I finally realized it had a detrimental impact on me after dismissing it for years. Story 72. My mom's cousin, as far as I know. He's in his late 40s, but something happened 10 years ago and his schizophrenia got worse. He never leaves his house, can't hold down a job, and often talks about unsettling stuff. Basically, everyone gave up on saving him. My mom tried for a couple years, got him a job, but she realized there wasn't much hope. Story 73. Me. Well, that's what my sister thinks. We don't get along, so we are no contact, and she is living with family. And to keep the peace, they are pretending they are also no contact with me. But we actually talk every day. Can't wait until she moves out so we can stop pretending. But not gonna lie, it's a little bit funny. Story 74. Me. Because I cut ties with my parents, brother, and sister-in-law because they are toxic, manipulative people who were destroying my mental health. I have been no contact for years and have not missed any of them even once. Story 75. My cousin. He and my uncle would vacation with us throughout my childhood. In his late teens, he started spending a lot more time with his mom and then basically went no contact with my uncle. Hasn't spoken to him or the rest of the family in almost 20 years. I miss him. I wish I knew what happened. He's up around Tulsa somewhere. Story 76. Uncle Alton should have kept your hands to yourself, big guy. Can't molest a dozen girls and not expect some consequences. You should have died in Vietnam, a hero, but you came back ducked up and became asshole. Story 77. My brother, because he likes it that way. I've seen him twice in the past 5 years, and that was a lot for him. He quit our family chat group a few weeks after we stated it 8 years ago. For the record, I have 3 other siblings and I talk to them a few times a week via chat. Story 78. Me, my husband's family are the most vile, two-faced, destructive people I have ever met. They literally try to tear each other down at every opportunity so they can be the best. My kids are grown up, my husband is an adult, and I'm free to not be a part of that circle trying to be accepted, and it's okay. Story 79. Me. My drunk Bill threw a drink in my face at wedding after starting an argument and won't apologize. I am the youngest in the family, so I was told life is short. Get over it. Really, I stopped talking to them. But the niece whose wedding it was hates said Bill and she and I still get along great. Story 80. My sister. She went religious zealot on us, especially against my brother who's gay. And we all sided with him. It was crazy. She was completely normal one day, falls in love with a Christian worship leader. Then the next day, she believes our brother is going to hell. What a hill to die on. Story 81. I'm the only one who talks to my cousin. She came out as pansexual a few years ago. Her spiteful ex actually outed her to her parents. And sadly, my Asian family is extremely homophobic. Sadly, I'm her only support and ally. Story 82. My Aunt Pam. At some point, she started hearing voices telling her to hurt family members. I don't have a ton of details, but I know she lives in an apartment on a property managed by some kind of mental health facility. Story 83. Me, because I was an asshole for a long time, and my family finally got sick of my crap. When I finally got my crap together, I figured I'd done without them this long. No reason to bother with recomplicating my personal entanglements. Story 84. Me, because my aunts and uncles and cousins were all upper middle to wealthy, and my parents dealt substances and were poor. Nobody wanted the dealers or their kid around their family while leaving me to rot in that situation alone. 0-tenths family is overrated. Story 85. An aunt who mismanaged grandma's estate and refused to return the money she stole until one of her sisters sued her for it. Aunt maintains her sisters were just being mean, but now none of her 4 sisters speak to her. Story 86. That would be me. My choice. Mom and Dad weren't much into parenting, and the extended fam were just people I saw once in a while. Never understood why folks live their lives around people that bring them mostly grief. Story 87. It was me. Once my mom passed away, I wasn't spoken to for over 20 years. My crime? Refusing to be a racist bigot filled with hate for anything not white, straight, and Christian. I am happy with their decision. Story 88. My grandparents. After my dad died, they offered to pay for the cremation. Well, they hijacked the ashes and dumped them without any of his children. I'm still thinking about showing up at their wakes and boxing them in their faces.